Hello, Sagittarius. I am Art Kozak. This is Art Kozak Tarot, and this is your reading for March 16th through the 22nd, 2020. Sagittarius, I have to say, starting out here, that in reading tarot for other people, sometimes I see stories and I see indications that don't make a whole lot of sense to me, but I have to rely upon you and your context to put them together. So hopefully this will not be too enigmatic. What I'm seeing here is that you are in an attitude right now where you are using your mind, you are using your sharp judgment, your logic, your rational thinking in order to address a situation in which your intuition is probably eventually going to be a good deal more helpful. But in order to get to that, you have to go through the process. You have to learn. You have to not overcome the mind in order to rely on the intuition, but to transcend the mind, okay? To employ your mind as a way to become one with your intuition. This is kind of a big deal. I mean, this is a big lesson that sometimes we have to learn in our lifetime, is how do we make best use of our intuition? And yes, being very logical is a step in that. I myself can identify with that very well, because learning logic and learning logic academically, learning logic in a very rigid way, for me was a big step towards then eventually learning to trust my intuition. I think you may be going through, overall, you may be going through a similar cycle. You're not going to complete that cycle in 1 week, okay? Because like I said, it's a big deal. And there are a number of steps that you have to go through along the way. I see that in the past, you have been very, very hopeful. You have had some clear cause for optimism. And it started with some charity, with some good reciprocal, maybe even physical gift that you were given. There was a lot of good responses. There was a period of time in which you were getting a lot of good, fast responses from other people, again, on a material level, but even often in terms of communication, that were coming back to you. And that let you know where the boundaries were. That let you know who the people were that you could rely upon. That let you, and those that you couldn't necessarily, that let you know, that helped you to figure out what the real possibilities were in your life, as opposed to the imagined. And so that led to a period where you were ready to charge forward. And very recently, maybe even in the last week, you have simply been charging forward, okay? You've been taking your energy and going to get things done. Even if you didn't necessarily understand mentally, clearly, logically, everything you needed to, you were using that clear, rational energy to get things done that you felt like you were bound to do. You didn't necessarily see a whole lot of other options there. Okay, so this period of hopefulness, even in the face of necessity, and even in the face of maybe even fighting some win-loss battles to find out where your boundaries were, this hopefulness is now going to be a little bit more materialized. It's going to be, the ideal is going to take form, as it were. And in the coming week, I see a situation in which the beginnings of material prosperity are kind of a source of stress for you. And this is represented by the Nine of Swords. And as I often say with the Nine of Swords, the Nine of Swords represents a situation, according to my readings, that in which the anxiety itself has become the problem, not what you're anxious about. And so you may, again, receive some kind of material gift. You may look and see that you have just enough money to get started on whatever you're getting started with, or just enough physical resources. This may actually have to do with your health as well. Getting to a good starting place with your health. Well, for whatever reason, that's going to cause you some anxiety because you know there's something that needs to go. You know that there's something that needs to go in this situation. And you're going to be fearing a loss, a big loss. I don't see that big loss actually materializing, but I do see some fear of it. So just be mindful of that. Try to ask yourself how much of this is just my need to be defensive, as opposed to something that you really need to defend yourself against. Later on in the week, I do potentially see some disappointment coming up for you in terms of an investment that you've been making in your future, in your long-term security. And this disappointment may be that something that you're after is not materializing for you, but it may also be that you're having to step away from something, that you're having to end a relationship, or that you're with a person or with a circumstance in order to move forward and make that investment in your future. But again, a little bit of disappointment, a little bit of heartbreak even, concerning an investment you've been making in your long-term security. Now, this is not anything catastrophic, but I do see that this is something that you need to be mindful of, that you need to be prepared for, because, again, you don't want this unnecessary anxiety to then go forward into this situation, which isn't necessarily going to be as bad as you think it is when you're going through it. Heartbreak is usually that way. It seems like absolute death and hell when you're going through it, but it isn't necessarily. All of this is about, once again, learning to trust your intuition. So by the end of the week, what's the overall conclusion here? Well, I do want to say, before I get to that you are going to find some good emotional support, some very strong emotional support in your life from another person, particularly, and this is going to cause you to kind of go through an evaluation. You may be actually going to a counselor or a therapist of some kind, or just having that kind of a talk with someone who is capable of being a good counselor and helping you do a self-inventory during your week. This may be a result of some disappointing circumstances or some anxiety that you're feeling, but this is the kind of person that can, once again, help you learn to trust your intuition going forward, can help you inform your mind as to what your intuition is telling you. The overall conclusion here is that you are going to make a judgment. You're going to make a big evaluation about your overall situation and see that there are some things in your life that you find tedious, and yet that there's nothing that you can do about right now. Okay, there are some things that just bore the hell out of you, and they're tedious and you don't want them, and yet in order for you to move forward in your life, you have to accept their presence there. I'm not asking anyone to accept the presence in your life of anything negative, anything. Do not accept the presence in your life of anything that is destructive or that is entrapping to you. That's not what I'm saying. But just some tedium. You just have to make peace with the fact that there's some tedious stuff going on in your life. That's some boring things. And this may be with your profession. Most of us experience, when we have a regular job, experience this. You're just going to have to make peace with that, because making peace with that is what's going to help you overcome it. And so I hope something that I have had to say is helpful to you in the coming week. I also want to recommend, I'm trying to recommend to everybody, especially for you, check out the Wheel of Fortune readings in the playlist section. The Wheel of Fortune is a reading designed specifically to help you see where your opportunities lie. Opportunities for growth, opportunities for forwarding your goals, whatever they might be. Things that you wouldn't necessarily see on your own, and that the universe or the gods, whatever, are trying to offer you. Hopefully also give you some information about how to pursue those opportunities, what they might lead to. So once again, thank you for being here. Thank you for liking, sharing, subscribing. I am Art Kozak, and I look forward to speaking to you again in the future.